just reach into your heart and Allah is always there. You are never alone. You are never alone. Through sorrow and through grief, through happiness and peace, you are never alone.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again to Family Issues. Hope that your siyam, salah, and qiyam and zakah and sadaqat will be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this great holy month. In this episode we'll be talking about how to make our kids love Quran, how can we make them committed to Quran, being attached to it, how do we teach them Quran, how do we help them memorize, and what are the best strategies to make them memorize Quran and stay attached to Allah's words, the greatest words ever, on the month of the Holy Quran, this great month of Ramadan. We are delighted to have with us here a very distinguished panel of guests. We have Dr. Mahmoud Adinawi, and he's a lecturer at Al-Azhar University. Jazakumullahu khairan, Dr. Adinawi, thank you for being here. We also have with us Brother Nadir Al-Mujahid, and he's a personal and family coach and trainer and founder of the website outstandingmuslimparents.com. Jazakumullahu khairan, thank you for being here, Brother Nadir. Dr. Dinawi, allow me to start by you and ask you, how do we make, first of all, our children love Quran in the month of Quran?
Yeah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah, sallallahu barik alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. First of all, I think we should start with children with very short surahs. Like, for example, start from Al-Fatiha, then Al-Nas, Al-Falaq, Al-Ikhlas. And we can make them love the Quran by, I think, children love something which is very colorful, with colors. So we can show them about the way how the Quran was written, first of all. Bring them some parts of the Quran, especially the short surahs. I know many publishers now do some colors with the Quran, like the word Allah, for example, written in red or written in green and whatever. So by this way they might love it, right? And we teach them what is the Quran, why we read it, why should we memorize it. But again, we shouldn't give them big portions, because this will be very difficult for them. Just start with a single verse, right? For example, the first day, and then the next day they will have 2 verses, and then 3 verses, and go up till the number is increasing. And then we need to check every day, right? And another thing that the Quran is, I think, should be taught by a sheikh or by a scholar. But you can't go to the, for example, to the PC or the laptop or any website, which that might be okay, but you need someone to read before him, and then he will correct your recitation.
You need this interaction.
Yes.
What if the father himself or the mother are really good at reading Quran? Do they need to go to a sheikh?
No. If the father is familiar with the recitation, and or the mother, for example, I think that would be the best instructor for them, because he is very careful. He will take the best care to make his children or her children love the Quran and learn a lot about the Quran.
Right. Brother Nadir, I guess the kids can be attached to Quran and love it before they even understand what is Quran. Maybe if their parents have the habit of reading Quran to them while they are sleeping, for instance, or while they are in pain and trying to relieve that pain. Is that true? And can this happen at a very early age? To get them familiar to the sounds?
Indeed it does. And the interesting thing is that, of course, no children are exactly alike. So there's not a cookie cutter. We wish we could make someone do something. If we could make our children like vegetables, for example, a huge thing could be solved. We can make someone feel a certain way, then we would have that control. And unfortunately, we don't have that control, regardless. However, we can attempt to plant good seed in them early. So, as an example, when we're talking about the Quran, children love to know facts. and to discuss the transmittal of Quran, to discuss how it was revealed over a period of 23 years, to discuss how you recognize a Meccan surah versus a Medina surah. You know, so these little things and these little facts start before Ramadan. You know, they start when they're young. When you're talking about the Quran, for example, and they become of age, then it's really not fun anymore if you're told, hey, we're going to memorize this one ayat and we're going to do this juz or this hizb. You know, it becomes a challenge, you know, when they get older. And depending on the seed you planted younger, then you will see the nourishment and you see the harvest coming. However, for those children, there must be some type of reward, some type of pain-pleasure principle that goes along with it. Because when they're younger, well, alhamdulillah, the brother made a good point. They love colors. There's either different coloring books or they're reciting and they're imitating, they're loving it, and we're building upon that foundation. Well, alhamdulillah. But as they get older, we need to go deeper in the understanding so we know what ayat, the situations and circumstances from when an ayat was revealed, like Surah Al-Kafirun, for example, in response to the Quraysh giving, and and ultimately, what do you want, your prophet? Then Surah Al-Kafirun came about. So knowing those circumstances gives them a novelty feeling of knowing more and being more attached with their heart as they get older and have larger growing understanding.
Right. Dr. Denawi, you mentioned the colors and how the kids are attracting to the way things are being presented to them. What about reading Quran via some of the verses that are present, for instance, in Prophet stories? I mean, we have these stories about...
Yes. I think this is a very good start also. I remember one of the very nice series last Ramadan was about tales of animals in the Quran, right? So if I think we mentioned before that children love animals. They go to the zoo, whatever. If I start, for example, with a short surah about the chapter of Al-Fil, right? First of all, I attract their attention and then tell them about the big story about Abraha who came to destroy the Kaaba, and how Abdul Muttalib, for example, responded, and that was the year of the elephant where the Prophet ﷺ was born. So I give him an introduction to the life of the Prophet through the surah. Then go back to another story, for example, about the challenge that was between the hoopoe and the Prophet Solomon, peace be upon him. And then again go back to another surah and tell them about also they love stories. How about we have a surah which is called Al-Hijr, about some people who used to make houses in the middle of mountains. They would say, oh, how is that? Then start telling them about these stories, about the queen of Bilqis, for example, and how she had a palace or made out of glass or whatever. So they love these stories.
On water.
Yes, on water, I'm sorry. Right? So, and this is a good start, then they will love the Quran. They want to discover more about such stories. And every day I give them a short story and then make it bigger, and then go to other stories. And then I think this is a very nice way.
Indeed, and of course the Prophet Musa alayhi salam's stories are really interesting to all of us, really, but especially to kids, especially in the Prophet stories, when they draw these magicians and Musa's baton or stick and the snake and everything. And I personally remember the Al-Kahf story when I was young. There were a series about Prophet stories. I really don't remember who was the writer. I think it was Sahar.
Yes.
And those were stories like 30 years ago or more. And I remember the drawings where he was drawing the people of Al-Kahf, and those people who slept for over 309 years in their kahf, and the way their beards were very long, and the dog that was with them. So, Brother Nadir, you talked before about making it fun for the kids, especially at a very young age. And we're talking maybe about 4 or 5 and so on. How important is it to make it fun for the kids to learn even about Quran?
Well, alhamdulillah, one of the ways that we learn is by playing. So when we tell kids, go play, well, they're sharpening their motor skills. They're having negotiation skills. They are communicating with each other. So with Quran, since they still have vivid imaginations, then it is a beautiful thing, because about half of the Quran is made of different stories. And one of the things we can definitely do, especially, is talk about the family dynamics in Quran. When you look at Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and his father was a kafir, and he decided to still be on the religion of his fathers. You look at Prophet Noah alayhi salam, for hundreds of years doing da'wah, and his own son, who he thought was family, when Allah Ta'ala told him no. When he called out, said, Ya Allah, I thought you were going to save my family. He said, no, he is not of your family. You know, subhanAllah, look at those dynamics. Then you have the sibling rivalry stories, right? We know what happened with Cain and Abel, the first murder, sibling rivalry. We know what happened with Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam and his siblings. This sibling rivalry, what happened? What we thought was we could think is a bad thing with Yusuf turned out to be a good thing, because Allah Ta'ala knows best. So these stories, and having them picture them like a movie in their head, in their imaginations. Now they know this is coming from Quran. This is Allah Ta'ala talking directly to us and giving us lessons from it. And then that's where we can open the discussion. And when we congratulate them on getting a lesson right, and we praise them on that, they feel good. And who doesn't want to feel good and good and good over and over and over again? We do. And just like our children do. So that's how we build closeness. Alhamdulillah.
SubhanAllah. Other than the short surahs, Dr. Dinawi, any other surahs that are easier to memorize for the kids, maybe 7-year-olds or 10-year-olds? Any specific order they should start in while memorizing Quran?
I think this is the normal way that most people do. They start, because starting from An-Nas, go up. Surahs start from being smaller and then getting a little bit bigger, right? So when they grow up, I mean, their mentality and whatever also grows up with them, so they can manage to memorize big surahs. But I can't give a child, for example, who is about 7 or 10 years old, and tell them, okay, you have to memorize the chapter of Al-Baqarah, because it's quite. And the most interesting thing,
although Al-Baqarah is easier to memorize than An-Nisa, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. I mean, some surahs are easier to memorize, maybe.
No, An-Nisa is more difficult, by the way.
Yes, that's what I was saying. I'm saying some surahs, maybe with the rhythm. For instance, Al-Kahf or Maryam. Or Taha. I mean, this series in the middle of the Quran might be easier, for instance, than later surahs that are shorter, maybe than Surah An-Nur, for instance.
I'll tell you something very interesting. Why should we start with small surahs with the kids? Because kids love to tell them, okay, how many surahs you have learned? Let's say 20. I have 20, 30. But he might spend years to learn Al-Baqarah, and you say, oh, it's only one surah. This is this not good. But when, for example, starting from An-Nas till Ad-Duha, I think about 15 surahs or maybe more, right? He will be very happy. Wow, alhamdulillah, I managed to memorize 15. I managed to memorize 20, 30, right?
So I'm asking after that. I mean, there is no, of course, this is the way we've all been, brought up, and I believe this is the way it's continuing, alhamdulillah, throughout the world, starting with the small surahs in Juz' al-Thalathin, and maybe after that going to the 29th chapter as well. But I'm saying, if there is the plan and the intention for our kids, for us to spend the effort for them to memorize Quran, or as much as they can. After they finish those short surahs, any specific order they should, tackle? And I was mentioning surahs like Al-Kahf and Maryam and Taha, maybe because of the rhyme or the rhythm or the words are easier, maybe, than surahs that might even come after them.
But we can't. The issue is we can't jump. You can't, for example, first of all, memorize the chapter or the first juz, the 31, which is An-Naba, and then tell him, for example, go to Yasin, and then go to Al-Kahf. There will be no order in the Quran here. So the order is either he should, if he is very young, start from An-Nas up. In our age, we start from up to down, right? So he can't jump or select some surahs.
Even if some surahs include stories, so they might be easier to memorize. Like I remember when we were young, I mean, we were given Yusuf, the surah of Yusuf, while we were very young, because it has a story. So maybe if things that have a story are
Yeah.
easier to memorize for kids,
Yeah.
or more interesting, or might make them more attached
Yeah.
than things that, for instance, talk about in Al-Ahzab, for instance, or in
Yeah.
An-Nur, that, you know, this is the awra and this is
Yes.
the...
Because the other issue is that he should know the sequence of the surahs.
right.
So we have An-Nas, Al-Falaq, Al-Ikhlas, Al-Masad, Al-Nasr, Al-Kafirun.
Right.
If you make any change, then there will be disorder in,
Okay.
you know.
Let's get
Okay.
Brother Nadir's view on
My
this.
perspective on this is a little different because it depends on where you come from and if you understand the language.
Yeah.
Okay, of course,
Yeah.
many people embracing Islam, like myself, are still trying to grasp the understanding of the language, which of course can take, it's 13 sciences and whatnot of, Arabic. However, one thing that I do with my daughters when it comes time to memorize the Quran, we give small goals. Like the brother said, we start with small surah because it gives them wins. They get wins under the belt. They get confidence. So, for example, depending on their memory, and they can read Quran, then it's a matter of how many lines you read, because each juz is approximately 20 pages. A hizb is about 10 pages. So if they memorize, and there's about 15 lines on each page. So on a daily basis, if it's 5 lines, not ayah, but 5 lines on the page, that means 3 days you'll have 1 page down. So that means 1 month you have 1 month you have a hizb. For example, for those who can read Arabic but may not understand the meaning of it, so it's really almost all the same to them. Yes, there is a rhythm, easier, more simple or more flowing in some surah over others. However, we start with the last juz because it gives them those wins.
Right.
And they've already memorized some short surahs anyway, so that's less memorizing they have to do, and then they start at the beginning.
Right. At the
Okay.
beginning.
Yes.
Okay. Same here. Is that your advice as well? After we finish the chapter 30, for instance, or chapter 29,
Yeah.
chapter 28 is not easy
Yeah.
to memorize. So you might find some. You said that you don't like switching and moving,
Yeah.
but others might tell you like there are easy ayat
Yes.
in different surahs that have a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
Of course, all ayat have a lot of meaning, but I mean, that might have more meaning to kids or to children, or might be easier to grasp because you are, again, I'm just giving the comparison
Yes,
here.
that's right.
If you're saying about bu'ulatihin and so on, this is, for kids, might not be very interesting,
Yeah.
but if you are talking to them about وَسَادِسُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ then this might be more interesting to them. So any advice here? Is it wrong to target specific ayahs across the Quran that might be appealing to children?
It depends on my intention. For example, what should I do? I might have the wish, for example, or the intention to make my children memorize the whole Quran or just few parts. If I'm intending to let them just memorize few parts for prayer or like acts of worship, for example, that's fine. But if you have the intention to make them memorize the whole Quran, this is I'm doing alhamdulillah now with my children, and they are 10 and 8 years, and they managed to memorize 4 chapters.
Barakallahu.
Right. So I am following the sequence of the Quran, because when they grow up, they know the Quran. For example, this surah was revealed after that, and this is the order of the Quran, for example. But if I'm going to choose selected surahs, I think this might make some kind of disorder for them. Anyway, and also the biggest surahs, they are talking about some issues that they might not understand, as you have already mentioned. For example, the chapter of An-Nisa mainly talks about issues about divorce, about iddah, about waiting period,
Mirath.
about a lady who lost her husband, and so on. So these issues are irrelevant to children. What relevant for them is just short surahs about some stories of animals or whatever, and this is very attractive for
Even
them.
the Musa and Harun stories that continues, for instance, in Taha.
Yes.
I mean, it's easy to memorize, and it's a lot of
It's-
verses, and it's a continuous story.
And the other issue also, which is very interesting, the short surahs, they are like keys. So we have a chapter of An-Nazi'at. It refers to a very, very briefly about the story of Fir'aun and Musa. But when you go up to the chapter of Al-Qasas, for example, or the chapter of Taha, you have the full story. You go bigger to the chapter of Al-Araf, it has more details. So subhanAllah, as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us with short surahs, you have just a very short introduction to what's going on in the future. So the more you go up to the surahs, you are going to have more details. And I think that child is not ready to know all details about the surah of the chapter of, or the story of Musa alayhi salam and Pharaoh. So I gave him just something short and keep the rest in the future.
Right. I don't want to be biased to Al-Kahf, but maybe it's because one of the surahs that I
very
memorized when I was young, and it was there is a sunnah on the Prophet.
Yes,
the Prophet
to read it
on Fridays.
Friday,
But because it has a lot of stories, I mean, Al-Kahf has different stories. I mean, I haven't counted them, but a lot of different stories, small story after small story after small story. So this was just why I was, maybe suggesting that this could be an approach to. If kids are memorizing, then they could be starting by those who have stories or a lot of stories. Brother Naveer, teaching our kids the Quran, Dr. Dinawi said, if the father or the mother are good at reading Quran, then it's best for them to do the job. Right. If not, then what's the best second option then?
Well, alhamdulillah, what I did, because I'm not that good at reading Quran. I mean, I could read Quran, but my tajweed and stuff is not there. I took my children to a sheikh online who held live classes. So now my daughters, alhamdulillah, can continue to have the hayah. And this sheikh in particular, his daughter, or he's a talib al-ilm, actually, his daughters, 4 of his daughters were also, they memorized Quran, the Hufa of the Quran. And alhamdulillah, the recitation is beautiful. He memorized the Quran in Hafs and Warsh. So he would teach, and he would teach the class, and he would listen to the students. So it is though they were there physically, even though it was virtually, it was done online. So they need to hear the ear, but thankfully online with technology the way it is. He also had a webcam, so he would point to what part of the mouth it will come from. He teach the makhraj of the letters and a number of different things so that they can get that done, especially
the way
in
you
the
said
West.
makhraj. You said it better than most of the native Arab speakers, by the way.
Well, alhamdulillah. Well, again, just taking, especially in the West, because there's not easy access to shuyukh that are teaching Quran. Like the city that I'm from, for example, there may be a few people, but a lot of them have jobs and other things that they do, and stuff is so busy and so crossed. But when you find someone, you can find different teachers online. You could ask for referrals. You could do it on Skype. You could do it for people who are just doing it, for sadaqah and stuff like that. That are not doing it for business or anything as well. So, if you are sincere in searching, then Allah Ta'ala will provide you something with someone who's qualified.
Indeed. Dr. Dinawi, you mentioned the importance of interaction. I mean, here is online interaction.
Yes.
Some parents don't want to take don't want their kids to be away from them. I mean, even if you tell them, okay, we're going to send them to a mosque or stuff, no, they would rather have them. Yeah. Is it recommendable in that case to bring sheikhs over to the house, for instance, to teach the kids?
If that's the case, for example, if it was in a country like here in Egypt that's available nowadays and that's very easy, but in the West, for example, so they can apply what Brother Nadir said. We can have what's called now Sheikh online.
Yeah.
Right? Or this is the technology,
Right.
So they can through the messenger or whatever, or Skype or any method.
And that's enough of an interaction, right?
Yes. It's because what the sheikh is going to do is just to listen carefully, right? And then he's going to correct, for example, the articulations or how words are pronounced, whether the kha, ayn, whatever. But I recommend if they can take the kid, because although the technology is fine, but we can't ignore the natural ways of learning the Quran, because the sheikh is going to make a kind of disciplinary acts. For example, if the child is making mistakes, he's going to deal with him anyway, right? And so on, and the child will be, I think, more encouraged when he finds the sheikh in front of him. He will be more interactive, rather from, for example, listening to using the computer or the laptop or whatever.
Right. Many times when, say, if you're trying to help your kids memorize Quran, you'll find that young child, the 2-3-year-old, for instance, running around. He wants to be part, or she wants to be part of it. And if you push him or her away, then you're risking making him or her, hate
Unhappy,
this.
yes.
And if you let him or her, hold the Quran, then the 2 or 3-year-old might do a lot of bad things with Quran.
Yes.
What do we do in these cases, Brother Nadir?
Well, alhamdulillah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it just pictured my living room with my sons running around and stuff like that. One of the things that I tell parents just often is to smother your children with love. Okay? Now, that would mean usually picking them up, having them close to you, and giving them whatever attention they need for a short time, and getting an understanding. Alhamdulillah, you do that, and you give it to them, you hold it, or you put it off, and you tell them alhamdulillah, and you involve them, because they just want recognition and to be involved. And then you can continue what you're doing, holding them tight, not loosely where they can get away and hit and swat and so on, or give it to the other parent. You have to find a way to isolate and distract the child doing something else with different toys or some food or something like that. But the main thing is to have a serious intention with doing it, but having an area that you could also do it as well that's conducive to learning, not that continually distracts. And it depends on what culture you're from, because I know in some cultures a guest may come by, everything gets put to the side, and you still are in class while the guests are being served, but you're the one serving the guests until things are done. So depending on where you are, if you could do it intentionally in an area where you can be in a safe zone, if you will, meaning there's a babysitter or somebody else watching the children so that you can concentrate and focus, or one of the other children are wise enough to take over and supervise and do what you need to do, that would be very, very helpful. But sometimes you can't, and you have to work with what you got, what Allah Ta'ala gave us.
Indeed. Jazakumullah khairan. Dear brothers and sisters, Brother Nadir, Dr. Diwani, allow us to take a short break, and when we come back we will be continuing this interesting episode of Family Issues. Please do stay with us. Assalamu alaikum.
Never alone, you are never alone.
Signs of the Hour. Tune in to Signs of the Hour with Sheikh Asim Lokman Al-Hakim 5 days a week, only in the month of Ramadan.
يا ربي بالمصطفى بلغ مقاصدنا. Oh my Creator, never alone, you are never alone.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. Dr. Dinawi, definitely the rewards and the punishments for children are effective, but what's the best way to deal with a son or daughter that doesn't memorize well? I mean, simply Allah hasn't given them the talent of memorizing, and some of the kids are like that.
Right.
So what is it that we should do so as not to make them lose confidence, and at the same time try to help them memorize?
Yeah, I think we should avoid using any kind of punishment with them, especially beating or whatever, because this is going to make them hate the Quran or hate the religion in general. But I can use the other way. People always say, instead of saying to your child, if you are not going to pray, you are going to hellfire. No, say to him, if you pray, you will go to paradise. If you keep the Quran, you are going to have more rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I shouldn't say, look, listen, if you're not going to learn the Quran, this is very bad. You are going to have loads of sins and you will be a sinner. No, I can use the other way around and say, if you memorize the Quran, you will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For every single letter you read, you will have a reward from Allah, as the hadith says. Right? And because I think that the way of mentality would be equal among all people. But some people, it depends on what way I am using with. If I know the child that, for example, is loving memorizing the Quran or whatever, I can develop this talent, right? And give him pieces, just small amounts.
So what if the child simply doesn't, isn't good at memorizing?
Right,
then should we quit this altogether and look for something else and to increase to increase the religious teachings? Should we just focus on him reading, rereading together and explaining and talking about it, and quit memorizing so as not to make him or her lose confidence? Or should we try to
Try many other ways, for example.
to develop this, because they will need it not just in, memorizing is needed, and I guess the memorizing skill would be needed in many aspects of life, and not just when we are memorizing Quran.
Yeah. I mean, we should do our best, try different ways to let them, for example, love the Quran, as we said in the beginning of the episode, and memorize. If he loves, for example, we know very well children are crazy about, for example, laptops, computers, iPhones, whatever, mobiles. So I can bring a software with the Quran, for example, on his own personal laptop or whatever the device he is using and she is using. And this will, every time, instead of playing some games, why shouldn't I turn a CD on with the Quran, for example, recitation? Especially we have something like learning Mus'haf or just tajweed or whatever. And this will increase their ability to memorize. And always, even if he is not memorizing it properly, just encourage him and I say, oh, you have been great today. This is a gift for you because you managed to memorize even single verse. Tomorrow he's going to memorize 2, after that 3, and the number is going, but I shouldn't punish him from the very beginning and I say, oh, you are not smart at all.
Or give up, or give up on him or her. Same question, Brother Nadir, for those who are not, skilled. I mean, we have to admit that, as you mentioned, not all kids are alike, so some kids are simply more skilled in memorizing than others. They might be less skilled in other things, but I'm talking here about memorization.
Indeed, indeed. Now, we have to recognize people have different learning styles. And we also have to recognize at one time, we didn't have skills either. We had to learn many things. Sometimes people picked up better than others. But for example, as human beings, we fall in this different category. We have audio skills where we like to listen. So some people prefer to listen to Quran. They close their eyes and they focus on the hearing and they can hear. And they learn to memorize better by hearing. Those are audio people. Then you have those who are more visual, who like to see and be able to see the letters and see the things, right? So you have visual. Then you have the kinesthetic people who like to feel. So they want to run their fingers over the page as they read Quran. So these are just 3 different modalities. We use all of these modalities, but we also have preferences for what we like as humans. And our children have these as well. So we have to see which style they like best, or which style seems to be better for them. So, for example, you have children that are more kinesthetic who have better athletic abilities. Then you have some who are more visual who are better with different academic activities because of the way it's taught. With kinesthetic, it's taught on the field, it's taught with the ball, it's taught running, it's taught physically. Okay? Same as with the Quran, as it be taught physically and you're feeling it and you're turning the page. So those are kinesthetic children, for example. Those who are audio, where you can recite, they recite after you and they're listening to you, these are audio. So we have to try to learn and understand our children's style. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Okay, so that's the first thing we must do as parents, try to find out what their style is. But then don't give up on it, because that will make Shaitan very happy. Yes, parents gave up on me on one of the most important things, of course, and it's the positive reinforcement, because when you know that if they have that strong desire to do so, Allah Ta'ala will open their hearts and their ability to do it, especially when you talk about on Yawm al-Qiyamah, where the difference in levels of Jannah is based on Quran that you know.
Right.
So we want to help build that desire in them and build them up. That's why you start with the short surah, that they can learn and they can build up confidence and get better, and we praise them. And we want to know what style they are, especially if something's not right. You may have 2, 3, 4 children, 2 or 3 took it on this way, but another one is a different way. Maybe it's a different style. See if they're audio, kinesthetic, or visual, and try a different technique, inshallah.
Right. Dr. Dinawi, Quran is easily forgotten. I mean, especially for adults.
Yeah.
I don't know about kids, but for adults it's easier to forget than I believe. That's I assume, and for kids as well.
Yeah.
So what's the best follow-up method? Okay, we know that, for instance, our child has memorized the chapter 30 this year.
Yeah.
So what do we do during Ramadan? What do we do during summertime? Okay. What do we do during holidays and stuff to make sure that he hasn't or she hasn't lost it?
Okay. What I remember from my Shaykh who taught me the Quran, may Allah have mercy upon him, he used to have what's called 2 parts. We used to have something called the past and the present. What does it mean? Right? for every day, for example, you are going to memorize something new, this is the present. And then you need to read something from yesterday, from the past. So, for example, if you memorize 4 juz, you are, for example, you have stopped by the chapter of Al-Mujadala, for example, then you need to read previously another part, like, for example, starting from An-Nas, Al-Falaq, Al-Ikhlas, and go up. So every day we have 2 parts. You have to read, to recite the new part, and then the old part, the new part, the old part. So the 2 parts going together. I think Sayyidina Umar, he said that the Quran is very, very easy to go away, as if you have a camel which is very tightened, and then you let it go. If you let the camel go, it will be very difficult to get back again. So the Quran, if subhanallah, if you leave it, it will be very difficult for you to bring it back. As if it's going, or as if the Quran itself says to you, don't leave me. If you leave me, I am going to leave you. Right? So this is I think the best way. Each child should have 2 ways. He has to recite the new part that he has just memorized, and then he has to recite the old part. So the 2 things will go together, and in that way he is not going, because if he, for example, managed to go forward about 20 parts of the Quran, definitely he's going to forget the very beginning from An-Nas and up.
Right.
So I have to check. From time to time, I have to make a kind of competition, I have to make a kind of race for him, for example, or examination. I say to him, okay, tomorrow you are going to give you a test. Just to check, are you still keeping the old surahs, or you have forgotten them?
Yes,
because it's, again, as I think, as we mentioned from the very beginning, what we are looking for is the quality, not the quantity. To have a child with 3 juz is better than having one with 10 and he memorizes nothing.
Right. Barakallahu feekum.
Wa feekum, inshallah.
Brother Naveer, is there a best, such a thing as a best way to make your children recite for Quran, or when you are checking up on them? I mean, okay, you want to test them, so do you have to have them sit down? Can they recite to you while they are walking? Can they do it while they are, relaxing their back? Young kids here, of course. I'm not talking about adults. I'm talking about young kids. If that makes them feel more comfortable, should we let them do this, or should we, tell them that this is about Quran? There needs to be more respect while you are reciting, and so on.
Well, alhamdulillah, though this is a matter of preference, I've seen it done a number of different ways, and I do it different in my household with my children as well. One is, sometimes it can be intimidating when you are reciting to someone that's testing you.
Right.
So the children get nervous in front of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I let my daughters do whatever they need to do. Usually they kind of rock side to side, or they're walking back and forth as they're looking up and they're recalling what they memorized, which is, alhamdulillah, which is not a problem. The other part is, though, to retain what they have learned. One of the best things, the brother that I told you about with the daughters, the 4 daughters that are, Hafiz al-Quran, they would take time, 45 minutes a day, and recite together. They recite. And when they come in the house, or if they're outside and they would just recite the Quran, not to lose it, to make sure that it still was there. So when the house was quiet, they would just recite. If they're not talking to somebody else, or they're doing some work, they would just go ahead and recite the speech of Allah Ta'ala, to keep it, to maintain it, to have it fresh. And it's also a family activity. So alhamdulillah, it builds closeness amongst yourself and amongst your family when you recite, and you consistently recite different parts in the past and the present. Alhamdulillah, it's a great idea, because you're keeping it fresh, you're keeping it live. It's kind of like, watering your lawn. It's kind of like, taking care of your garden. If you don't take care of your garden, weeds are going to grow in that garden. So we have to make sure we're taking care of removing those right away. And those weeds are all of the distractions that get in our garden that can affect, our memory and our retaining it. So I like for them to do it whichever way they're comfortable doing it.
All right. As we close out the episode here, we want to know from you, gentlemen, what's the best way to get ready for Eid and for Muslim festivals in general. I mean, and of course we have Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr al-Mubarak, and these are the main, of course, the main festivals. So generally speaking, what is the best way to get our children and ourselves ready for Eid? And what are the best practices in Eid? Because we must have some very wrong practices according to tradition, even in Muslim countries, and not just in the West regarding Eid.
Yeah.
Dr. Dinev.
Yeah, I think the best thing we can do is always we have to check the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, how he used to deal in such situations. When the Eid, for example, comes, we know very well that it's one of the customs or one of the traditions of the Prophet to have, first of all, to have new clothes, right, and to offer the Eid prayer. And if it's, for example, the Eid of Ramadan or Eid al-Fitr, we have to give out what's called Sadaqat al-Fitr before the time of prayer. Because once we have prayed, anything you are going to give after that, it's not Sadaqat al-Fitr, it's just charity as usual days. But it should be given, for example, before praying Salat al-Eid. And also we shouldn't forget in this month, especially in the month of Ramadan, that there are loads of people who are in need for our help, especially those who don't have something to break their fasting, for example. They don't have the ability to buy new clothes. What I'm talking about is the feeling of solidarity, or we need to have the feeling of community in general. All people should care about each other, because the hadith says that the one who doesn't care about the affairs of other Muslims, he is not a real Muslim, right? So, and we should let our children also have a kind of fun, because alhamdulillah they manage to perform fasting for a number of days, and then we say the day of Eid, by the way, in heavens, or the angels call it the day of the prize, right? So today, my children, my beloved children, you are going to have your prizes. This is your gift, and this is a new, for example, toy, and this is whatever. I can't take them, for example, to a big park or any place they love, just to have a day of fun, to have 2 days, to have 3 days, and that's it, I think.
Anything wrong with the fireworks and stuff like that?
Oh, this is not good.
Because many kids really love this and wait for. Is it because it's dangerous, or is it because it's bid'ah? I mean, which of the two?
No, it's not a matter of bid'ah. It's dangerous, and right? They can play with other things, or because fireworks might hurt.
I'm talking about al-bomb and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of kids, just as Ramadan gets in, hey, Dad or Mom, can we get
little? In Egypt, you call something like little missiles or rockets, just for children anyway. But anyway, we should also tell them that in Islam we have the hadith which says la darara wa la dirar. You shouldn't hurt other people, and you shouldn't hurt yourself, right? So you have to keep yourself away from harming people, even by noise itself. You can't take them to, for example, to parks or to whatever, but don't use something like dangerous games that might hurt children themselves or hurt others, because this is not an Islamic practice at all. We should. Some people say, oh, everything you say Islamic. Even in Eids, yes, even in Eids. Because the Prophet ﷺ told us to do everything according to the way of Islam. You can feel happy. There is
but isn't there a way where kids can have fun with it without hurting others? I mean, if they're just playing together, a bunch of brothers or sisters playing together with this and just making that noise, it's not really harmful to yes, it's okay, but again, we should keep in mind, for example, don't disturb our neighbors, don't disturb those who are old, because children sometimes they make some tricks to make fun of old people. Indeed.
So, yeah. SubhanAllah.
Indeed, SubhanAllah. I just can't help but remembering, children in balconies and trying to target people running across. Brother Nadir, same thing about getting ourselves and our kids ready for Eid, our festivals.
Well, alhamdulillah, especially in the West, where it's not publicized, okay? The responsibility lies on our shoulders as parents, as a community, to really make it fun. And for the children especially, because it's so rare. I mean, we have 2 festivals. No one really knows. It doesn't fall on the same day each year according to the Gregorian calendar and stuff like that. So it could be a challenge. Of course, the clothes, when you're dressing up and being ready to go, and you showing up and representing as a family, and you're showing up clean, and you have the gifts. And you also encourage them to exchange gifts with other Muslims, seeing where their friends are and have time. But more importantly, you set up a time to ask them about the lessons they learned as they reflect on what just happened. What lesson did you learn? How can you relate this to an earlier time in Islam? Then you have fun. You know, then you have fun. You have good halal fun. Now, according to what the brother said, though it might be dealing with other people and stuff like that, if you could safely use them in parks with the fireworks, some adult supervision, maybe it'd be okay for fireworks, but we really don't do that in the West. That's fireworks are usually only just used during a specific holiday of the non-Muslims. But nevertheless, to be clean, to be joyous, but to know the Sunnah of the Prophet. So after Eid al-Adha, you know, you fast that time, but you don't fast. You break it. You eat before, after the Eid al-Fitr and stuff like that. You eat on the day on the way to the Salat al-Fitr. So it's just the little things that you make sure you're following, and you're being appreciative that this is our day, that we're unified across the planet. And inshallah ta'ala, we are unified on the day, because sometimes that could be a challenge with us as an ummah. But we know that we are connected to Allah Ta'ala. This is our thing. This is what we do as Muslims, as part of our identity. And we take it with gratefulness and pride. The pride that's grateful as opposed to the pride that's arrogant. You know, we build that up within our children to love it and to like it and to continue on the same tradition, knowing that we're doing it within the guidelines and the boundaries of Islam, and this is a mercy from Allah Ta'ala for us.
Indeed, Jazakumullah khairan, Brother Nadir. May Allah make this Ramadan and this Eid al-Fitr Mubarak the greatest ever for Muslims, and the upcoming years, inshallah, on an uptrend as the greatest ever for all Muslims around the globe. That's all the time we have, dear brothers and sisters. Thank you for watching us. On behalf of you, we thank very much Brother Nadir Al-Mujahid, personal family coach and trainer, and founder of the website OutstandingMuslimParents.com. Thank you very much, Brother Nadir. Jazakumullah khairan. And thank you very much, Dr. Mahmoud Ad-Dinawi, lecturer at Al-Azhar University. We enjoyed having you here. Jazakumullah khairan. Jazakumullah khairan, dear brothers and sisters, for watching us. Please do not forget to keep your mails going at familyissues@huda.tv. Until we meet again, have all the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alone, you are never alone. Through sorrow and through grief, through happiness and peace, you are never alone. So now, as you long for your past, prepare for your future, but knowing nothing's gonna last. You see, this life is but a road, a straight and narrow path to our final abode. So travel well, O Muslim, and paradise will be your home. And always remember that you are never alone.